So I'm going to share with us right here from about the half of the first to the second century, all the way to the end of the fourth century, or third century, I should say. These are the early church fathers that have quoted from the book of Enoch. So I gave you sequentially right there 150 by the name of Minucius Felix and Clement of Alexandria. So you see the list of the names right here: one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10. In 250 AD, there are two of them: 12, 13, two in 269, 15, 14, 15, 16, 17. So just in the time frame of first 4th century, we have 17 early church fathers who are quoting from the book of Enoch. I would tend to think that is sufficient for us to take the book of Enoch a little bit more seriously, if not seriously, right? Now, I got it right here. Church fathers who taught that the sons of God, here we go, Bill, the sons of God were angels. These are the groups of the church father in their interpretation of what we're going to unpack tonight, particularly as regard to this phrase, the sons of God. These are the church fathers that believe that they were angels. So you have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, right? On the other side of the coin, we also had some church fathers who, in their interpretation of the phrase, the sons of God, they did not interpret them as an angels, but they interpret them as descendants of the son of Noah called Seth. So I have it right here. I listed for you right here four of them: Theodoran, Jerome, Julius Africanus, and Chrysostom. What is this telling you and I? Just think about it for a second.
Mm.
How you interpret the Bible matters. These four early church fathers, Theodoran, Jerome, Julius Africanus, and Chrysostom, for whatever reason, including Augustine, by the way, that I did not list right there, they interpreted the phrase, the sons of God, as descendants of Seth. And because of that, forever, their interpretation will contradict the first group of the church fathers and influence a whole lot of Christians because of that. Bill?
That's the exact question I wanted to ask you with the Sethites. What is the difference? Because again, I'm in a battle with my kid
Mm-hmm.
who where we brought this point up. This is I cannot believe that this is even something we're going to discuss, but this is the contradiction. He's battling me. I'm getting battled right now, and I said it 1,000 times, very educated on the history. And
Yes.
this is part of the history where the church breaks up into different groups in the Orthodox,
Yes.
and this is where it happened.
Yes.
This is good. What is the difference?
Yeah.
Why
So let me,
Africanus, Julius Africanus especially?
yes. So again, where this church father originated from, the kind of theological schooling they went through, and personal experiences, all those factor in. Let's use Augustine, for example. Augustine was a womanizer. So when God's grace touched his heart and turned him from a womanizer to the Roman Catholic Church actually gave him the title, the Doctor of Love. So, because of that, he had a tendency, based on his sexual, immoral lifestyle, to reject the interpretation of the sons of God as angel. As a matter of fact, he had a theological persuasion in his doctrines when it comes to how evil begins, the genesis and origin of evil in the world. He attributed it to the semen of the man. That's because of his prior immoral sexual lifestyle. Simply put it, simply defined, this group of fathers, church fathers, that rejected the interpretations of the phrase the sons of God as angel, they look at the sons of Seth or descendants, male descendant of Seth, as the sons of God. And then they ignore all other biblical references of this phrase, the sons of God, that have been used throughout the Bible. It's in your note that I sent out. It's very clear. Every time the phrase, the sons of God, is used, it's a reference to the angels. So, because of that, now we have two groups of Christians. One that believe the sons of God are angels. One that believe the sons of God are male descendants of Seth. Is this making sense to you, Bill?
Yeah, it's coming together. Sons of God, that was the argument. It is man. It is not anything other than we are the descendants. We are called the sons of God, no one else. That was our discussion based
Now,
upon the notes that you sent. I sent him the notes that you send me. He just doesn't have the gumption. He will soon. We're gonna be
he will.
we will 100% gonna be zooming together
He
soon.
will. He will. Now, the Aramaic word translated as sons of God, Irin, it actually means just that, angels, holy ones. We have an example of that in Daniel. If you remember when we first unpacking this book, I gave you the example straight from Daniel, where Daniel saw one, holy one. So this word Irin in Aramaic simply means angels, Brian.
So it's, again, like Billy said, it's funny that we're talking about this tonight because I've done a lot of reading about that term Benani Elohim, the sons of God, and it's used in the Old Testament, always referring to the fallen angels. But it's like you taught us, Paul, that we have to go back to the beginning of Genesis, and we go back to the 3rd chapter when God was cursing the serpent, the man, and the woman. He says to the serpent that I will put enmity between your seed and her seed. You will strike at his heel, and he will crush your head. And the reason that I believe that it is the sons of the sons of God are referencing the fallen angels is because I believe that this was one of the devil's ways of stopping the gospel or Jesus Christ from happening, because if he could infiltrate the genetic makeup and impurify the genetic makeup of man, that was a way that I think, at least that's what I've read, and I think the Spirit has showed me that that was a way that the Satan was trying to infiltrate the gene pool of God to stop Jesus Christ. And if we go, Enoch being the grandfather of Noah, it says, why was one of the reasons Noah was chosen? It says that he was found without blemish. He didn't have any of the impure gene of the Nephilim in him. So I just believe that was a way for the devil to stop Jesus, because he had to come through that bloodline, and it had to be a pure bloodline.
So
it had to be the fallen angels.
So you answer the question from a different angle. The term B'nai Elohim, right, as I explained before, this word Elohim, translated correctly, it means divine counsel. Imply in this word divine counsel is God has all the angels as his counsel, as his divine counsel. So when it says in Genesis 1:26-27, let us make men, let us make men in our image. He's talking about his dialogue, God, with the divine councils, angels. He's consulting with them, so to speak. Should we not make man in our own image? What is the big idea? The big idea is Elohim, as divine counsel, consists of angels. So because of that, and because that's the first time it is used to refer to angels, so when it comes to, for example, Irin, the Aramaic word, which is the equivalent of the word Elohim, You cannot interpret that as sons or male descendants of a human being. You have to interpret this phrase, the sons of God, as the angels, as the book of Job clearly says, as Elohim in the phrase, B'nai Elohim, sons of God imply. Now, again, like I said, why some theologian or church father decided they don't want to go that route, I have no idea. One thing is for sure. If you do the digging in the original phrase, B'nai Elohim, there is no other way to interpret that word Elohim, as divine counsel consisting of angels. See, this is where you have to make a choice yourself. Do you want to believe in the first group of the church fathers, or do you want to believe in the second group of the church father? To each and every one of us here, God has given us this self-will to choose. But understand, with each and every decision you make to the exercise of that self-will, the consequences, you're going to go through with it. If you chose to not believe that the sons of God refers to an angel or angels, then the rest of the Bible, whenever you study them, whenever you come to the phrase the sons of God, you automatically are not going to interpret it correctly, especially in a book like the book of Enoch. Then it becomes a moot point for you and I to study this book, especially for the rest of the book. Enoch is going to tell us his journey, directed and led by some of the angels who show him all his knowledge, all his insights, all his revelation. So if you believe that the phrase the sons of God refer to the sons or male descendants of Seth, then there is no need for you to study the book of Enoch. It will not make sense.
Oh, that's
As I
good.
said,
Yeah.
as I said before, why is it we have no problem accepting the revelation? An archangel named Gabriel came to Mary, told Mary she was about to have a child. She should name his, the child Jesus. But we have a hard time. We have a hard time believing that the phrase "the sons of God" refers to angels. It doesn't make sense to me, Bill.
But that's the challenge that we have as Christians. I mean, between the first and the second and the third centuries, these different groups they split. They literally split up everything to forming what we have today. I I'm still baffled by it. You know, some follow this way, and some it's just that's just that's a spiritual problem that I think my son is having right now, where he's just dead on. And I'm sorry I keep mentioning my kid, but you know I just got off following him a little while ago, and
Well,
these are the reasons he's bringing up the first church, the first century. These are the ones. The second century and the third, they broke away. They didn't do A, B, and C, so they're not to be followed. Which is the reason that many of them studied. You know, they knew the Enoch doesn't have an author, and you know we're still having this discussion months later.
that's all right. That's okay. As he digs more, the Holy Spirit is going to lead him to the right resources. That's all.
Amen.
That's
Amen.
all.
If he
Right?
digs with his heart, all right,
Yes,
not his
that's the most
mind.
important thing, because here's what I find out about studying the Bible. And I always remember this. My professor, my theology professor told me from day one, Paul, whatever is your theology that you believe in, the moment you walk into my classroom, I want you to leave them behind. Because if you don't, you're not going to learn anything from me. What is the idea? If you approach the Bible every time you study the Bible with a preconceived theology, you already are robbing the Holy Spirit from giving you the revelation.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
That is the truth. That is the truth. Here's a good example. John Calvin, Martin Luther. These are modern day theologians. They're reformers at that. Yet they refuse to believe that the sons of God refer to angels.
Hmm.
Now you think about that for a second. Man like Martin Luther, used greatly by God to bring about a reformation in 1517. And yet he chose, to the exercise of his self-will God gave him, to refuse to believe the sons of God as angels. Nobody gets it all. That's the whole idea. Nobody gets it all.
Right.
But thanks be to God. Let me take this out, right? Thanks be to God. I'm going to show you, historically speaking, that the sons of God must mean angels. Cannot mean sons of Seth, male descendants of Seth, right? Let me share with you here what Josephus. How many here are familiar with Josephus? He has a volume of writings called Antiquities. Antiquities. So I'm going to cite two from his Antiquities. This is from 1.3.1. By the way, all his writings are available free of charge on the internet. You don't even have to spend a dime. Dig it out. Type it in. Josephus Antiquities. Sean?
I did pre-read these, and it was a little bit hard to figure out what's what with the 131 thing and the you know what
Yeah.
so
It basically is like chapter 1, book 1, chapter 1, section 1, something to that effect.
yeah
You'll get used to
I
it.
ended up finding it because I knew that it related to what we're reading.
Good. So look at what he says. Look at what he writes right here. For many angels of God. This is a historian writing this. Case closed. He did not begin this writing by saying, for many descendants of Seth, sons of Seth. He clearly, specifically penned it down. For many angels of God, accompanied with women, begot sons that prove unjust and disposers of all that was good on account of the confidence they had in their own strength. For the tradition is, right there, keyword, tradition. For the tradition is that these men did what resembled the acts of those whom the Grecians called giants or titans. Now stop right there for a second. If a Hebrew historian, Jewish historian, would equate the descendants of the fallen angels and the daughters of men like as the Grecian giants or titans, does this not refer to you and I that titans did exist? Am I right?
Mm.
Why would a historian refer to the Grecian titans if they didn't exist?
Right.
But you and I have been told it's a myth. The titans were a myth. Is this making sense, folks? Sean?
They're mentioned so many times it isn't even funny. I mean,
Yes.
That's the whole thing that, and to be honest with you, I never realized how much they were until I started researching.
Yes. Yes. This is why, like I always said, like Proverbs 25:2, search the matter out and you will be blessed. Brian.
And just like to kind of follow what Sean said too with the Titans, like Hercules, he was half man, half God as far as the Greek mythology, and it kind of goes along with the Nephilim, sons of God, born from the daughters of men, half man, half angel, half man, half God. I don't want to call him God. I don't want to refer to him that, but you get the point.
Yes, and that's
so
a fairly.
They got the idea from somewhere.
Well, let's just skip forward here. Let's go to chapter 7, verse 5. Chapter 7, verse 5. This should answer your question, your concern, whether what you have read about half man, half animal is true. Watch what Enoch writes for you and I right here in verse 5 of chapter 7. And they, the watchers, the fallen angels, began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish. Now you know why in the Grecian mythology they have hybrids. Man and fish, man and bull, man and phoenix, you name it, you fill in the blank. Enoch is telling you and I right here in front of our eyes. Verse 5 of chapter 7. Right? It's up to you to believe that or not to believe that. Now, let me share another writing from Josephus about that phrase, the sons of God. This comes from 5.2.3. So it will be like book 5, chapter 2, section 3. In Hebron, there were till then left the race of giants who had bodies so large and countenances so entirely different from other men that they were surprising to the sight and terrible to the hearing. Watch how prophetic what he wrote right here at the end. The bones of these men are still shown to this very day. As we speak, they are still finding out skeletons and bones of giants. I sent some of the pictures to you, and I tried to give us a compendium of what was found in the bygone years and coming to the closest to our modern era, including some that were found in our own country at that, folks. In our own country at that. So, on that note, let me share some pictures of the giants that we have found in our own country, so to speak, right? If they were not real, how do we explain the fact that they were even found in our continent, in our country at that?
Yeah, he's not even that giant either compared to some of the other ones, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
it's like Steve texted about Andre the Giant. I read this text, and he's bigger than Andre's bigger than that.
he was minute. That guy in the last picture was minute compared to the actual size of the first hybrid, the Nephilim. So here's another one. It's so-called the Lovelock Giants. Guess where they were found? Nevada.
United States.
Yes. So how do we explain this?
You know, I was thinking that even like Osama bin Laden, if you ever saw him standing next to people, that dude was like 7 feet tall or something. You know what I mean?
That's
Yeah.
a big boy.
How about Barron Trump? Trump's tall, but Barron Trump's pretty tall.
Yeah, just look at the size of the bones, a skeleton.
The femur is bigger than the guy standing next to it.
Yes. Now, because it says later on it's going to tell us right here the actual size according to Enoch of this Nephilim, and you'll be real surprised if you do a quick mathematical calculation. But this is my favorite pictures, by the way, of all the pictures of giants. This has nothing to do with the giants, but this is very, very revealing, and this is very, very important. What does this look like to you?
Elephant. It does look like an elephant.
Almost looks like a gorilla grabbing the side of the wall.
Now, if you were not studying the book of Enoch, you look at this picture, you would have never thought it was a fossilized body part. The word for it, Bill, behemoth in Hebrew, behemoth.
Behemoth.
Yes. You cannot miss that. You don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to be an archaeologist. You just stand back and look at it from a distance. It's very apparent. Now, why am I bringing this picture up? Because a lot of these giants, Nephilim, and the 6 succeeding generation from Nephilim, we're going to talk about that later on, when the flood came, they were completely submerged by the water. So they die, so to speak, in the water, and some of their organs fossilized, and they look like stones. You and I are not going to recognize them as the organs of these Nephilims, Rephaim, Anakim, however word that they use. But to archaeologists, for example, whose expertise is to analyze these things, they conclude that those are not really stones. Those are actually body parts. I think I sent some of the pictures to you guys, right? Fossilized body parts.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
So when I was reading this 575, and they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles. And I was wondering exactly. I mean, I know that it says they were drinking their blood and stuff like that, but I was thinking too that if they were having sex with these animals, is that where the dinosaurs possibly came from? I mean, because a lot of the dinosaurs look like the smaller lizards, but they're a lot bigger. You know,
So
I don't know, is that crazy thinking or what?
no, it's not crazy thinking. What you just said right there is something that a lot of so-called Christians they prefer not to even talk about it. What Enoch is telling you and I in verse 5 right here, bestiality. Bestiality, that's the terminology, right? When a human being having sex with an animal, that's bestiality. It's been happening since the time began. So here's another nature evidence, evidence from nature of the existence of giants. That's a footprint on a rock. How do you explain this? If the book of Enoch is not real, is not telling you and I truth, how do you justify all these pictures that some of them I've sent to you guys, some of them I'm sharing with you guys right here, right? Now, I gave you in the list there scriptural references to the sons of God as stars or as angels, coming from Job chapter 1, verse 6, Job chapter 2, verse 1, chapter 38, verse 7, Genesis, Deuteronomy, Isaiah, Revelation. There is no way the phrase the sons of God refer to the sons of Seth or male descendants of Seth. There is no way. Now, why don't we start reading chapter 7 and chapter 8, right? And then I'll share with you a few more important thoughts that Enoch wants you and I to get. Frank?
Sons of God refer to the angels.
Mm-hmm.
So can we interpret that in Genesis 1:26 when God says, then God said, let us make men in our image, that the angels were also made in God's image?
No. What that word us, our means, God was having a consultation with his angels. He's trying to get their opinion, so to speak. Should we make man in our image? Right there's a reference to the Father, to the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Okay. Yeah. So
it's
okay.
not an image. The hour is not an image of his counsel. The hour is the Trinity.
Yes. So we are made in the image of the Trinitarian Godhead. But the use of the word us and our right there is a reference to the presence of the angels in that word Elohim, B'nai Elohim, divine counsel, right? Stephen?
So the B'nai Elohim, the divine council, they aren't the fallen angels, or were they the angels prior to the fall? Because now the fallen angels we're calling the sons of God. Am I correct? I just want to be on the same page.
Yes, so B'nai Elohim is a reference to the angels before they fell. After
Okay.
they fell, the term that is used to refer to them is Nephilim. Scholars are still debating to this day why the term Nephilim is used, right?
So if the term B'nai Elohim is used as a reference prior to the fallen angels, then why is it used in Genesis the 6th chapter to refer to the fallen angels? I looked it up on Bible Hub. I went to that where it says the sons of God came unto the daughters of men. It says B'nai Elohim right there in Bible Hub was referring to where it said the sons of God in Genesis 6, referring to what we're talking about, followed by having the Nephilim.
So in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, Moses is giving you and I a retelling of what the angel that had failed did with the daughters of men. So it was the beginning of the retelling. So he had to use that term B'nai Elohim to refer to the angels, the sons of God as the angels. He's retelling. He's telling you from the beginning.
So then how is it used in Job when he refers to B'nai Elohim?
In Job, it is used as stars. See, we have to differentiate right here. Before they fall, they were B'nai Elohim. After they fell, when we say after they fell, it does not just refer to a physical falling.
Right.
When
When
it
they
says they
slept with
fell,
humans.
what it actually means is they had sex. Having sex with women is what is referred to with this word fall. See, we Western mind, we read this word fall, we think they fall from the sky and therefore they're called fallen angels. No, this English word fall, fallen, when it comes to this angel, is specifically alluding to the sexual intercourse. This is why Jude says in his writing, they abandon their abode lusting after the women.
So then the fall is not referring to them rebelling against God when Satan or Lucifer said that I will ascend on the mount of the congregation and become like the Most High. The fall is not referring to taking a third of those angels then.
You're talking about a different group of angels right here.
Right.
Okay.
I'm glad you clarified.
These are the watchers.
So that's a different group of angels.
Yes, if you watch what we did last Monday, Brian, right?
Unfortunately, I wasn't here. I apologize.
Yeah, but it's up on the YouTube channel. That's my point.
Yeah, I know. I've been catching up.
Yeah. So if you watch that, I had explained to everybody, we got two groups of angels. The first group explained why Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, there is a gap between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. Some scholars believe what fills in the gap between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2 is exactly what you were quoting. Satan falling, getting kicked out of heaven by Michael and taking with him 1/3 of the angel. In that regard, the word fall refers to their, if you want to put it this way, physical falling from heaven to earth. When it comes to these fallen angels that the book Enoch is talking about, that we are unpacking, we have to remember the use of this word fall or fallen is an allusion to the sexual acts that they committed against the women, the daughters of men, that caused them to forever not only abandon their abode in heaven, but they cannot go back again. In fact, two things happen following this sexual intercourse. Number one, they left their abode, like Jude was writing about. Jude, verse 6 or verse 7, somewhere right there. Number two, they cannot. Once you leave your abode, like the angels, they cannot. The spiritual implication of that is when it comes to you and I, if God puts you in charge of a ministry and you bailed out, it's no different than the angels being in charge by God as watchers, watching over humanity, and then they decided they want to leave their abode to have fun, quote unquote, with the daughters of men. And because of that, God said, you're not coming back. We have a precedence of that in Genesis chapter 3. When Adam and Eve sinned against God in the Garden of Eden, guess what God did to them?
Kicked them out.
They got kicked out. They cannot come back. You and I are still working our way back to the Garden of Eden. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth. But it is the truth, right? So it says right here, and all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one, and they began to go in, right there, to go in, to have sex, to have sexual intercourse unto them. And as a result, they defiled themselves. They taught them charms and enchantments and the cutting of roots and made them acquainted with plants. And they became pregnant. It doesn't get any more succinct than that. They became pregnant. They bare great giants whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all acquisitions of man, and when man could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds, beasts, reptiles, fish, and devour one another's flesh and drink blood. Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. 8. Azazel taught men to make sword, knives, shields, breastplate, made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, bracelet, ornaments, the use of antimony, the beautifying of eyelids, all kinds of costly stones, all coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness. They committed fornication, they were led astray, became corrupt in all their ways. Semjasha taught enchantments and root cutting. Armaros, the resolving of enchantments. Barakil taught astrology. Kobakil, the constellation. Ezekil, the knowledge of the clouds. Arakil, the signs of the earth. Samsil, the signs of the sun. Sariel, the course of the moon. And as men perish, they cry and they cry. Went up to heaven. So here's a big question. Why did they lust after the women? You ever thought about that?
Yeah.
Why did they have to use the women?
To
Now,
reproduce.
Because woman's the seed. She's where the Messiah comes through.
So like to infiltrate God's design, his perfect
Right,
image,
like I
to
said
distort
earlier.
it.
let me share with you a couple extra biblical sources that clearly and succinctly explains, right? The first one, how many here have heard of the Testament of Reuben? Bill, have you come across this book? The
Yeah, it's in,
Testaments of Reuben.
I haven't read it, but it is in here.
Okay, so this comes from chapter 5, the Testament of Reuben. So this is part of the Testament of the 12 patriarchs, right? So in chapter 5, verses 5 and 6, it says, accordingly, my children, flee from sexual promiscuity and order your wives and your daughters not to adorn their heads and appearances so as to decide that's a misspelling. It should be deceived, so as to deceive men's sound minds. For every woman who schemes in these ways is destined for eternal punishment. For it was thus that they charmed the watchers who were before the flood. As they continue looking at the woman, watch this. This is very important. As they continue looking at the women, they were filled with desire for them and perpetrated the act in their minds. Then they were transformed into human males, and while the women were cohabiting with their husbands, they appeared to them. If this revelation has been made public from the beginning, this would have saved a whole lot of marriages, don't you think?
Wow, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot more than that.
This gives you the dynamic of lust. This gives you the dynamic of adultery, fornication, extramarital affairs. It says right there. Look what it says right here. They continue looking at the women, filled with the desire as they look at the women, and perpetrated the act in their mind. Is this not what James writes?
That's
Yeah.
funny.
This is but I hate to keep it. I don't care how long it takes to get through I don't care if we study this book for 2 years, but I have to break this down. Going back to the Watchers. Now, there was the fallen third that went with Satan. These are Watchers that were told to watch us.
Yes.
This was from God to say, watch over the sons and daughters of, the Adam and Eve who sinned. You need to watch over them because they sinned once. Make sure they're okay. This is the group of watchers that found lust in the women. I'm correct thus far, right?
So this Testament of Reuben is referring to what we're unpacking right here in this book of Enoch, which begins in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4.
Right. Not so much talking about Reuben, but in Enoch. This is the group that was supposed to be taking care of us. They were appointed to say, don't let them watch over them. And then they still ended up corrupting us with weapons and witchcraft and all the crap.
Yes. So in these two verses, it explains to you and I why they chose the women to accomplish their goal of leaving their abode instead of staying in their abode, being the watchers that God created them to be. The book of Hebrews tells you and I very succinctly, angels are ministering spirit. You take that two words ministering spirit out, put the word watchers in it, it makes a whole lot of sense. But what this tells you and I simply is this: if angels could lust, how much more you and I?
There was good watchers too, though, right? Wasn't there two groups really of watchers? The ones who made the mistakes and then other watchers, good and
Yes.
bad?
Yeah,
So,
because remember, the book of Enoch tells us there's only 200 of them, right?
Yeah, there was
Yeah.
a certain group.
Yes.
So, but wouldn't they had to have had contact with us to watch over us, to tell us you're screwing up, or to spiritually
Well,
guide us on like, why are you wearing makeup? Why are you showing your belly? Why, you know what I mean? I mean, they would have had. Am I stretching this? But
No,
wouldn't they
you're
had
not.
to have had contact with us?
No, you're not stretching it because between Genesis 3 and Genesis 6, there's a whole lot that the English Bible does not tell you and I when it comes to how human itself became corrupted in their ways. This is why we need to look for all these extra biblical sources, such as the
Yeah.
book of Jubilees, such as the Testament of
Yes.
the Patriarchs, such as the Testament of Adam himself, the book of Jasher, for example, right? This is why all these books are up to this day. Only a few of them are being released, are available.
It almost seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, it says, for every woman who schemes in these ways is destined for eternal punishment. It makes me kind of think that the women were kind of flirting with them or luring them.
Great observation, because in the book of Enoch itself, if you notice, Enoch is going to give us the same group of angels under two different leading angels, one
Yeah.
Samsashah, the other one Azazel. And later on, the book of Enoch will give you two versions of the story. Who's at fault? Is it the watchers? Is it the women? Right?
I mean, it makes all the more sense when Jesus says that if you even lust after a woman in your mind, you've committed adultery.
Now you're connecting the dot. What I just shared with you from the Testament of Reuben, how the angels who were supposed to be watching us, they decided once upon a time, put it that way, they looked at the women much more than they should. They spend more time observing the women much more than they should. It says early on in chapter 6, verse 1, right? It came to pass when the children of men had multiplied that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. The beauty and the comeliness of the women attracted the attention of all these watchers. They couldn't help themselves. Curiosity, so to speak, got the best of them. And then they had their own council with 20 leaders. The one in chapter, for example, 6, we talk about, Enoch talks about Samsashah being the leader, right? Remember we talked about it last Monday?
making a
He said,
vow.
and now chapter 7 begins by saying, watch how it says in chapter 7. All the others together with them took upon themselves wife, each chose for himself one. But you're right in the sense that when Jesus said adultery begins when you look at a woman lustfully, guess where do you think Jesus get that revelation from?
Right there.
I just want to, in a root sense, they just got horny, and then they started, they played the girls, and the girls gave in, kind of thing, almost like a bar scene. Probably
Yeah.
fed them a lot of lies.
I've thought about many times, since being I'll say a solid Christian, that how hard lust really is, and how reality is God made women way more beautiful than he should have. because it's why I know it's like sexual immorality and all that is talked about so much. And I feel like lust is one of the hardest things to deal with. And that's reality, and that's for us, for all men. I feel like it's a pretty hard thing to deal with. You know what I
It
mean?
is. It is.
So-
So, what I can share with everybody here when it comes to beauty, as in regards to the beauty of a woman, the beauty of a woman is intended by God to be a means, to be a way, to be a tool for you to be attracted to Him, the Creator that gives that woman that beauty.
Since I've become a Christian, I try to remember that like every woman is God's daughter. You know what I'm saying? So
Yes,
it's easier than it used to be, but it's been the hardest battle.
yes.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know.
If you remember, I show you a scientific study how women who had abortion, remember the groups of women, 4 different
Yeah.
groups, remember the conclusion from that study? Whatever man a woman has intercourse, sexual intercourse with, she's gonna end up carrying his genes. So let me challenge your thinking process here. Follow my thinking process through. If the angels lasted after the beauty and the comeliness of the daughters of men that led them to have sexual intercourse with these women, that scientific study proves that these women ended up having their genes, and down the corridor of time, their genes have been passed down again and again and again. Is this not why you and I, as men, were born with this natural propensity to lust after beautiful and comely women?
So we got to be like Joseph and run.
Yes.
Whew.
Yeah. Just think of the comical idea in that line when Moses says Joseph was tempted by Pharaoh's wife and he flee. The angels fled from their abode to commit sexual sin. Joseph fled from sexual temptation, so he did not commit sexual sin. Now you have a choice. You're going to repeat what the angels did, or you're going to do what Joseph did.
Do what Joseph did. It ain't worth it.
That's the whole idea.
So then let me ask you this. All these prophets that went through the line that had concubine, did they all have that dark spirit in them?
Prophets?
The prophets, David, Solomon, they all had concubine. Did they have that dark spirit in them? David couldn't, right? Because he bore Jesus a seed.
No, we have to take another factor into account. During those days, in those culture, one of the reasons kings acquire a lot of wives and concubines was for the purpose of expanding their territory and their
Kingdom. Yeah.
so you
Right.
cannot really zero in on that in that regard, right?
Okay, then can I just? And I'm not trying to challenge you, but what about Bathsheba? Was David was lusting after her first? I mean, I don't know if he was trying to multiply his. Well, maybe he was.
So if we read the story in the context, David should have been in the battlefield. But for whatever reason, the Bible didn't tell us he chose to stay home. And in that culture, when you are a king, you live in a palace. Bathsheba was just an ordinary Jane, if you want to put it that way. So just imagine David palaces maybe 10 times higher than the height of the house where Bathsheba was. In this culture, the top of the roof was flat, unlike our roofs. The top of the roof of the houses in this culture were flat. Some of them were used for the purposes of bathing under the sun, for those who like the sun, for example. So David happened to be on the top of his roof looking all over. Lo and behold, you can blame it on the devil if you want, but the reality was David should have been in the battlefield, but he did not. And because of that, he fell for his sexual temptation.
The initial reason for him to stay home could have been an idea that was put in his head by Satan. Like, you know what I'm saying? It could have been a planned out thing, right?
Yeah, well, we had a proof, if you want to put it that way, from the Bible. If you remember the story, he counted the numbers of his soldiers. Remember the story?
Yeah, the
It
census.
says in the Bible, Satan was the one behind that idea. So yes, in that regard, it's very, very
Right.
possible. It's very, very likely. The same way Satan tempted him to count the numbers of the 25 and above age men that are available for battle. The same thing happened with Bathsheba, right? So what I have right here is Targum Pseudo Jonathan. Targum, it basically means explanation, verbal explanation that ended up to be written down. So this is an explanation on Genesis chapter 6, verse 2. What's what it says right here? The sons of the great ones saw that the daughters of men were beautiful. They painted their eyes and put on robe and walk about with naked flesh. They conceived lustful thoughts, and they took wives to themselves from among all who pleased them. So I gave you the explanation of that word robe. Red powder or cream used as cosmetics for coloring the cheeks or lips.
Rouge. I think it's called rouge.
Rouge, okay, sorry, sir. So whose fault is this? Do we really have to make a big deal out of this? Whose fault it is?
Probably both, right? I mean,
Yes. It says right here, they walk around naked, the women. You tell me a man that will not be tempted seeing a woman walking around naked.
Dead man.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Mary Alice.
The reason the women were the instrument, the means for these angels to commit the sexual sin, if you want to put it that way, is because it's intended to be a gendered dichotomy, duality, dichotomy, difference between the watchers, between the women being the watchers, human wives, and Enoch. So it's a contrast. It's, to some degree, you're not going to like what I'm about to say. Take it with a grain of salt. It's a literally context. It's a literally context to spotlight the dichotomy, the duality, the difference between the daughters of men as the watchers, angels, human wives, and Enoch. Why? Because eventually, as this chapter tells you and I, the women became recipients of rejected mysteries from the angels. On the other hand, Enoch was singled out as the learner of the true secrets. The women became the mediator when it comes to the relationship between the earthly and the heavenly worlds. So they became that mediator. Now, I want to stop right there for a second. Think of where the Roman Catholic Church got the idea of Mary as a mediator, right here. If this woman became mediator of the relationship between the earthly and the heavenly worlds, that's where they got this idea of making Mary the mediatrix next to Jesus when it comes to the redemption of mankind. So, as the mediators between humanity and divinity, the women then became this means for reproductive link between man and God, as it's apparent in chapter 7 and chapter 8, in verse 2 of chapter 7. They, the women, became pregnant. They bear great giants. One more. The sexual relationship between the angels and the women is described also as a dichotomy, contrast between the spiritual angels and the fleshly women. Now, you and I are familiar with the Old Testament passages because we're going to the book of Ezekiel. Even Ezekiel mentioned in chapter 13, verse 17, about women wearing, prophesying, I should say, out of their own imagination. If you remember, we unpacked that chapter 13. In 2 Kings chapter 9, verse 22, Jezebel, a queen, a woman, was singled out and accused of performing countless harlotries and sorceries. Now, you're going to also see some passages in the Old Testament prophetic books, minor or major, where a city or a nation particularly foreign city like Babylon, or foreign nation like Babylon, Assyria, Egypt, they were identified, literally speaking, as prostitute, as harlot. What is the idea? It's to give you and I a composite image of the link between sexual seductiveness of sorcery, spiritual, sexual seductiveness of sorcery and witchcraft, and tied it to the evil nature of those cities, foreign at that, nations at that, that eventually tempted and lured the people of God to sin. So, from a literary perspective, this is why the women were chosen as the means, as the instrument for these angels to commit their sin, their sexual sin. Why am I bringing this up? Because we're living at a time right now. How many here are familiar that there is a movement right now to take all the pronouns in the Bible when it comes to God being male, father, he? There's a movement right now to take all the male pronouns when it comes to God and replace them with a neuter gender pronoun because they claim the Bible is sexist. This is why I'm sharing this with you, in case somebody asks you a question. That sounds like sexist to me, for the angels to choose the women to fulfill their lustful desire. Now you can explain it to them. Bill?
This is tying in because when the Watchers taught spells and all of these things, they did it with the women, not the men. They taught the women the spells. They taught what we would prefer to now is witchcraft. They didn't teach the men. It says specifically it was the women who the Watchers taught these things to, that were not supposed to be divulged to them. These were things that were to remain above at the right time with God. Am I wrong with that?
No, you're not. So we have a precedence in the Garden of Eden. Who did the serpent approach first?
Yeah, yeah. Started there, yeah.
So coming to the New Testament, we have a writing from Peter, right? Peter said, women are the weaker vessel. That's not a sexist statement. Peter, when he wrote that, he had Genesis 3 in his mind with the sole idea to teach the man to be responsible protector over their wives so that they don't repeat the mistake that Adam did in the Garden of Eden. Brian.
So is what you just said, is that alluding to why Adam went with Eve? I mean, there's no dialogue that he was even approached or tempted in any way in that setting.
Yes, but
there's no reference to it at all.
But Paul's writing is very clear. He concluded as a rabbi, as a Pharisee, right? Eve sinned out of innocence because he was tempted. Adam sinned willfully. In what way? Well, although the Bible in Genesis 3 did not tell us specifically where Adam was, but if you retrace back the context of that story, to whom was the revelation given when it comes to which trees and which fruits that they're allowed to eat and they're not allowed to eat? Was it Adam or was it Eve? Adam. What is the big idea?
He should have known.
He should have known.
He should have told his wife.
Yeah.
Yes. So imagine for a moment, if you would, Eve took the fruit. She came to Adam.
Yeah.
When Adam saw that fruit in her hand, he should have asked her.
Yeah, smacked her in the
Where
head.
did you get it from? Who gave you the fruit? But no, he took it. He took a bite out of it. This is why Paul said Adam sinned willfully.
But did Eve eat the fruit before she got to Adam? It says that they weren't even supposed to touch it.
Pick it. Yeah, not even to pick it, right.
If you read that story, right, I think I explained this to everybody before. Of the 5 faculty, seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching, the only faculty that Eve did not sin with, guess which one?
Hearing.
No. Hearing
Tasting.
was the first to go because she bite into the lies.
Right.
Smelling.
Smelling.
The fact that Adam eat given by Eve, that means Eve must have touched the fruit.
Yeah.
The
Right.
fact that she listened to the devil, hearing was the first to go. Seeing was the second to go. Touching was the third to go. Tasting was the fourth to go. Smelling is the only faculty is not impacted. Why is this important? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. Everything in the Bible, as I always say, that it's there for a reason, right?
And again, I'm just bringing this point out. I'm not trying to argue with you or anything. I just, from my knowledge as far as the human body, that smell and taste are so closely related that if you can't smell, you can't taste. I'm not trying to start an argument. I just wanted to bring that point up.
I will explain it this way to you. I will not be quick to make that conclusion because life's experiences tell you and I. A blind man, though he cannot see or she cannot see, but God somehow, some way makes it up with the other faculty.
Thank you.
Now, the reason smelling is not victimized, if you want to put it that way. How many times in the Old Testament you see this phrase? The sacrifices offered in the temple became sweet-smelling fragrance to the nostrils of God. In his wisdom and love and sovereignty, God knew that the serpent would come. The serpent would tempt Adam and Eve. So he insulated, spiritually speaking, supernaturally speaking, to the degree where the smelling faculty was not impacted. Because God looked down the road following that incident in the Garden of Eden. Remember, God killed a couple animals, took the skin out of the animals, made cloth out of it, and put it on them. That's the genesis of animal sacrifices. You connect that with the smelling faculty, not victimized. Now we see the big picture. This is why it took God thousands of years to condition the mind and the heart of his people when it comes to the animal sacrifices, how they should become sweet-smelling aroma to the nostrils of God, to prepare them for the time when he would send his own son as a living sacrifice.
Amen.
That's deep right there. That's worth a teaching or two. As I said before, I thought I'd include that so that if somebody ever asks you, the book of Enoch is sexist, and they say, well, why were the women chosen? Now you could answer them. The best way to answer them, if somebody ever asks you, it's part of the literary technique to give you and I a composite image that would depict the spiritual, sexual seductiveness of sorcery, of witchcraft, of black magic. Later on, I'm going to show you a couple practices that have been passed down even to our modern day that some churches themselves are performing. So back to first one, chapter 7, right? So we're clear right here. To go in means to have sexual intercourse. As a result, they defile themselves. Now we're going to unpack these words. Charms, right? Enchantments, all those big words. By the way, when it comes to first one, as in regard to the sexual intercourse, I gave you all the biblical references. You can read it for yourself. Genesis 16, 30, 38, Jubilees, those that have the book, Jubilees, read them. It's going to help you to really get a solid understanding, right? Because remember, I always say sequentially, chronologically, Enoch, Jubilee, Genesis. That's the right sequence. Enoch, Jubilee, Genesis, not the other way around. Not the other way around, right? So when it comes to defiling themselves, I gave you some references from Enoch itself. Chapter 9, verse 8, chapter 10, 12, 15. So charms in the, remember, some of the fragments of this book, when they found it in the Dead Sea Scroll, some of them were in Greek, some of them were in Aramaic. So when it comes to this charm, it basically means drugs, poisons, magic potions, medicines. And we have a verse from Revelation chapter 9, verse 21 that parallels that interpretation. Enchantments, that's talking about charm potions created from plants. Cutting of the roots, this is a reference to herbs, herbalists using it for the purpose of medicine and witchcraft. Acquainted with plants, this is a reference to herbs and vegetation. So I alluded early on to Ezekiel chapter 13, verse 20. Remember we talked about the women wearing these bracelets and covering their face and their head with head covering and hair covering. Now, the words, the Sumerian/Akkadian Babylonian word used to describe those magic bracelets, kesatot, and during this time, when a woman did stuff like that, as in regard to sorcery and witchcraft, not only did they use those magic bracelets and cover their face and their head, they also have a vessel. What is interesting is the vessel has engraved on it, if not the real snake, will always have either an engraved snake on that vessel or a real live snake on that vessel. Now think about it for a second. The pharmaceutical company that we have in our country, what is their insignia? What is their symbol?
The caduceus, two snakes.
Exactly. So now you know, nothing new under the sun, like Solomon wrote, right? So that's one example. Because according to biblical scholars by the name of G.A. Cook, C-O-O-K-E, the reason for the use of those bracelet and hair and head covering, those functions, when they're casting a spell, those becomes the portals that either bind the people they're putting a spell on or releasing them from the spell. Brian?
So then a question then, as far as the image of the snake, then can you explain then why does God, what was the rationale or the reasoning? He told Moses to fashion a bronze serpent and put it in the middle of the camp so that whoever looked would be saved from the poison.
So why did God tell them to do that?
Yeah, if you're asking me, I would say it's a reference of pointing to the future event of Christ hanging on the cross.
No. If you read that story, right, they were rebelling against God. They were throwing the temper tantrum. So God sent snakes to bite them.
Right.
So that's why he told Moses, make a snake, put it on a pole. Whoever look at that snake will be healed. It's undoing. It's an undoing act on the part of God. Derek?
But he also
in the New Testament when it says, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so too shall the Son of Man be lifted up.
So you're asking me a question. Why then the use of the snake as in regard to God telling Moses to mount a pole and somehow, some way carve a snake out of something and mount it on that pole? The context tells us they were bitten by snake and they were dying. So Moses interceded to God. So God said to Moses, okay, make a pole, carve a snake, mount that snake on the pole. Whoever look at it will be healed. In that context, it's God undoing the punishment because of the people's stiff-neckedness, temper tantrum, or what have you, right, Derek?
Yeah.
So then what's the reference to God telling Moses to lay his staff down and turn that into a serpent to go against Pharaoh?
No, that's a different context. That's talking about the deliverance of God's people from the Egyptian bondage, right? See, we got to be careful. We cannot just take a statement out of a story and then apply it because that same word in that statement is used in another story. Watch right here what's happening right here. Snake in the book of Numbers that Brian was bringing up. Then Brian alluded to something in the New Testament about Jesus and snake. And now Derek is asking the question about Moses' staff turning into snake. In the story of Moses' staff turning into snake, the idea in that story is to prove to the Egyptians and Pharaoh that the biblical God was more powerful than their own gods. We have to be careful not to take a word simply because that same word is mentioned in another context, another story, and then put into that story a different meaning.
I just always assumed that the snake or the serpent was just a sign of evil.
Well, if you tie that to Genesis 3, the serpent being symbolic of Satan, as a matter of fact, if you do a dig into this word serpent, nachas, right? I think I said this before, it actually means something shiny. Something shiny. So what does that mean? Something that's lucrative, something that's attractive, something that catches your attention. That's basically what it refers to. If there's one thing that caused all these heresies that we have, is putting into the Word of God an interpretation, a meaning that is not intended to by the author. Just think of if you take what happened in the deliverance of God's people from the Egyptian bondage when God said to Moses, draw your staff and it will turn into snake and it will eat the snakes that Pharaoh's magician, Jambre, I think one of the name Mambre and Jambre, I call them Mambo Jumbo. Because that's what they are. They're magicians, they're sorcerers, right? So if you take that interpretation and put it in numbers, will it make any sense? No, it doesn't, right? So it's a discipline. It's a discipline in hermeneutics. It's a discipline in interpretation. I'm going to share with you some stuff right here. I don't know if any of you are aware of this.
The lotus?
No. There's a terminology for it. It's called mandala. Mandala. So what is the big idea? It is mandala. Mandala is a concentric diagram. Here's how you're going to prove why this is being used in the circle of sorcery, witchcraft, magic, as a portal into the spirit realm. Just stare at this mandala for a few seconds, would you?
Start to move. It almost looks like it breathes.
You're going to begin to experience things, don't you? Like Stephen said, that things are moving, you're being drawn into the center.
We will do whatever you say, Paul.
No, this is a well-known portal. This is a well-known portal used in the magic world, divination world, sorcery, and witchcraft worlds. Now, some people, when they look at this intently, what they ended up experiencing, they ended up experiencing dreams, they ended up experiencing seeing demons, struggles with demons, and then, as I said before, they ended up dreaming about them. So this is just one of the examples of portals that mankind came up with when it comes to first one right here, charms, enchantments, for example, right? So this would belong to the category of charm and enchantments that today is being used, is being practiced all over the world at that.
Well, take it off the screen already.
Okay. Let me share with you another one right here.
Can I ask you something? Remember
Sure.
a couple years ago, there was a picture of Obama that was like buried into a bush or something like that. Do you think that was kind of still carrying on that artwork?
I wouldn't know the connection of that, but I wouldn't be surprised, Stephen. All kinds of stuff are being revived from the paganism that I shared with you guys on last Monday night. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a connection in that regard right there. So how many here know what this picture is?
Mirror.
So a man
Mirror.
looking at a mirror.
Yeah.
in the dark, right? So something come out of that mirror. Not good. This is called psychomentium. Psychomentium. It's a practice of placing a chair in front of a large mirror in a dark room without light. So that mirror becomes a portal. And the more that individual look at the mirror, the more he opens the portal into the spirit demonic realm. Why am I bringing this up? How many here are caught up and consumed into taking selfie?
Not caught up, but I've done it.
What do you think selfie is?
Self-idolization, self-idol.
Same principle at work right here. A mirror, a portal. Whether in this case a mirror, whether in the case of selfie, the screen of the cell phone or television at that. Do you ever thought for a second that when you spend too much time watching TV, do this tonight. Wherever your TV is, right? Flip the light on, look at that TV for a few seconds, walk away, turn the light off. If you stand at a distance, looking at that black screen TV without the TV being on, it's almost like it's a hole on the wall.
You know, what's really funny is I had one job in my life where I drove with another guy in the truck. And at night, he would leave these colored lights on in the truck, and his reflection was on the windshield. But he never noticed it until I drove the truck, and I had to turn the lights off. I'm like, I can't stand seeing my reflection in the windshield of the truck. It's like looking in a mirror while you're trying to drive at night. And after I told him that, he stopped doing that. He said, I never noticed it, but now I do, and I can't do it anymore. So,
yeah,
pretty crazy, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know what we're on to here, but it reminds me of the Amish people. They don't let you take their picture. They don't have mirrors in their home. And that's, they will ask you kindly. No pictures. They'll turn their back if you take it. They'll turn. They won't look into the camera, and they will not have mirrors in their home. They don't believe in that. And this is going to tie together somehow. I know it.
Maybe they knew something.
Yeah.
We need to know about mirror. Stephen?
Well, even now, getting dressed to go out at night, it almost opens a portal as, hey, I look good tonight. Let them other people look at me.
Now let's connect all these dots, right? Mirror, it says right here somewhere in chapter 8, verse 1, right? The beautifying of eyelids, cosmetics, women, right? So most of the time, I know this because I'm married to a woman of Latin persuasion, cultural-wise, who's very into beautifying herself. There's nothing wrong with that. So in order for her to be able to do that, she has to spend a lot of time in front of a mirror, right? Now, if you remember back a while ago, I had shared some information, revelation, insight about this brazen big ball right in the outer courtyard of the tabernacle where the priest, before he sacrificed the animal, right, he had to wash his face in that water in that bowl, brazen altar, and the inside of that altar, brazen altar, is made out of mirror. What am I getting to right here? I always said that Satan is the great imitator of God. What God intends for mirror to be good, he uses it for bad. Such in the case of the psychomentium, people using mirror, sitting in the dark without light, staring at themselves in the mirror. The mirror becomes a portal that opens up into the spiritual realm. It's very interesting that one of the things that these fallen angels taught the women were cosmetics. For them to be able to put cosmetics, they're gonna need to use mirror. It's no different than the young generation these days spending a harder time taking selfie. What does that do? The moment somebody put a whole bunch of thumbs down instead of thumbs up, as they share a self-picture of themselves that they took by themselves and spread it all over the social media. What do you think that's going to do to them when they receive more thumb downs than thumb ups?
Right.
So I'm trying to connect the dot here for us to see verse 1 of chapter 7 is being done on the daily basis, even as we speak. They may not be necessarily in the wording that it says in verse 1, charms, enchantments, the cutting of roots, making them acquainted with plants. Speaking of that, some of you are familiar with this next slide picture. How many here have drank this?
Oh, absinthe? Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah, I know absinthe.
Okay, what is it made from, Bill?
It's made from roots. It's hallucinogenic.
Yes. Do you
Yeah.
know what the name of the root is?
I don't.
The name of the plant. It's a wormwood plant. Wormwood. By the way, that same word wormwood is in the book of Revelation.
Biblical wormwood. I did
By
not
the
know
way,
that.
technically, the technical name for this plant is Artemis absinthium. Artemis absinthium. Who was Artemis? The book of Ephesians tells you and I. The great apostle Paul had a lot of spiritual warfare in the city of Ephesus as center of the worship of Artemis. A center of the worship of Artemis. By the way, Artemis is also the name of the Greek and the Roman goddess Diana. She's also known as a huntress. She's also known as the sister of Apollo. She's also associated with the Egyptian frog goddess Hesed. The Egyptian frog goddess Hesed. So let me take this out. Let me show you the picture of Hesed. The Egyptian frog goddess Hesed is also known as a goddess with three forms. As a goddess with three forms. You see right there in the statue, archaeological at that, three different faces. What is the symbolism? The Romans call, so to speak, this three-face, three-form goddess, Tryphia. By the way, the name Tryphia is also a reference to a particular plant, aconite. I'll show the picture of the plant later on. I want to unpack the three faces right here. This Egyptian goddess is also known as the goddess of the moon. So one of the face is the reference of her being the goddess of the moon. The other face is her being Artemis or Diana. The other one is her being the Egyptian frog goddesses who is in charge of the underworld. So now you connect the dot, this Egyptian frog goddess, Artemis, and that green-looking drink. Is this making sense?
There's also that movie, The Three Faces of Eve. I don't know if anybody ever saw it. They won Oscars or something for it, but it was all about a lady who had multiple personalities and stuff.
Yes, so you're getting somewhere right there with the mention of that, right? So I mentioned about the name Tryphia as also a reference to a particular plant. So this is aconite, called also Tryphia, aconite plant. Why am I bringing this up? How many here are familiar, for example, do you know who Oscar Wilde is?
Yep, he was big into stuff. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he had a very famous writing called The Picture of Dorian Gray, right? How many have read that? So how many here are familiar with Salvador Dali, a painter? One of his famous painting is called Christ of St. John the Cross. Christ of St. John the Cross. These two individuals that drink, Bill?
Abstinence. This was their, yeah. It's
was their
called the
favorite
devil's
drink.
potion. Yeah,
And
yeah.
the reason they drank a lot of that, by their own admission, when they drank a lot of that green-looking drink, it opens a portal for them to connect to information that is out of this world. Now you can see that in the painting of Salvador Dali, Christ of St. John the Cross, or in the writings of Oscar Wilde, the picture of Dorian Gray, for example, right? By the way, how many here are familiar with René Descartes? René Descartes, a French scientist at that. So I'm going to share with you another picture of another plant, a particular plant. Here is another plant used by the medicine men in time past that they turn into some kind of a concoction or potion that when they drink it, it opens a portal to them to connect to the spirit world. All I'm doing right now is showing everybody here the first one of chapter 7, what these fallen angels taught women and also men. Later on, the book of Enoch tells you and I, whether metalworking, whether charms and enchantments, herbs and vegetations and what have you. So this is known as the ayahuasca tea, ayahuasca tree, used by the medicine men to help them to step into a different realm, right? Now, Frank, can I ask you something, Frank? Are you familiar with a chemical called DMT?
I've heard of it, but I'm not familiar with its use.
There it is. I've got it in the pictogram for you.
Tryptamine works on your visionary senses and your melatonin within your body and your nighttime, daytime cycle of whether you're sleeping or awake.
Yes. So this particular chemical, DMT, dimethyltryptamine, is naturally produced in the pineal gland. Pineal gland happens to be located behind our forehead, just in the back of the brain.
It's termed the third eye.
Yes. It's also known as the third eye. Can I tell you something? There are churches in our country who would use this particular chemical in their concoction, in their worship services for the sole purpose of connecting themselves to the spirit realm. You're going to find those churches particularly in Utah. How many here know that Utah is the hub for Mormons, right? So Mormonism is a cult. So what they're doing, they're adopting and adapting verse 1 of chapter 7 when it comes to acquainting themselves with the plant, cutting themselves of roots, coming up with concoction and potion, and they use it in their worship service to connect themselves with the spirit realm. The same thing that we're reading right here in chapter 7. Nothing new under the sun. And it's going to get worse with each and every passing day. Why? Because the book of Enoch tells you and I, these watchers are coming back. One of the sure signs Jesus is coming back is when these watchers are coming back again.
I just looked up that chemical compound, okay? And it's called ketamine. It's on the street. They call it Special K. It's one of the hottest, it's a club drug to trip. There's an actual street name to what you just showed me. That's crazy. And it's an very abusive, I mean, Derek would know. He probably picked up 1,000 people who OD'd on it or went nuts with it. That's extremely dangerous.
Just look at it like this, right? What is a revelation in this book today is an everyday reality.
Special K's in the Bible.
So I guess my question is Because apparently I'm going right to mind control drugs. Most of the people in Hollywood have had to go to this place, to the mountain or whatever, and did this. Tom Petty sings about it. Is it a lie, or do they actually get into a spiritual place? Is it a, you know what I'm saying? Because listen, I've done acid back in the day, and it takes you to a place that I just don't like to be. It's just it's a trip, and there's a reason they call it a trip, because once you get on it, you can't wait to get home. You know, but is it a lie, or does it really take them to this spiritual place? Or
It does.
Does
It,
absolutely. Yep.
you can Google this out for yourself. Cocaine, when you use a lot of cocaine, it opens your third eye.
well,
To
because now
you,
they're talking about microdosing acid. Doctors are talking about microdosing it now, using it as medicinal.
why do you think the symbol and the insignia of pharmaceutical company has snake? It's right before our eyes, under our nose, but we're not just
Never
paying
mind.
attention, or we're not doing our due diligent research. What are they feeding us? What are they giving us? What are they injecting us? You follow what I'm saying? It's time to wake up from our spiritual slumber. I don't
But
think it's coincidence we're unpacking this book, Bill.
I understand that, Paul, but there's a lot of circles that say we get most of our cures from the Amazon, from the plants. And if the Amazon was gone, we could lose a lot of cures medicinally. What would you say about something like that?
As long as there's a balance in that.
Yeah.
But when the greed for profit, when the greed for money takes over the honorable intent of coming up with a medicine to cure a particular sickness, then we're repeating what this chapter is telling you and I. The fallen angels unloading, unleashing upon women and men all these secret mysteries, divine knowledge and revelation, and then men use it for the words. Later on, we're going to talk about in chapter 8, verse 1, when it says that his swords, knives, and shield and breastplates. How many here remember in Genesis chapter 6 or somewhere, it says the name Tubal-Cain, right? He is the first martial artist. He was the first to come up with sword, to come up with all kind of warfare equipments, weaponry. Mary Alice?
No, I was just going to say, to follow up what Bill was saying about the what we're learning here or talking about here is, and you were saying it's a balance, is that we have to have the wherewithal in us not to fall for the traps, the marketing, and all that stuff. I mean, you can't have TV on for more than 2 seconds and there's a cure for everything. And you can live on ibuprofen and Tylenol and all those kinds of things, or you can try really hard not to get hooked into that. And I think sometimes we only think about, quote, the bad drugs. We think about opioids and all those things. But I think that the pharmaceutical industry as a whole gets us hooked on even what we would say are, normal drugs, like aspirin, Tylenol, and all that stuff.
Yes. So my response to you will be this, right? This is why the word television, if you divide that, it comes from two words, tele and vision. But whose vision are you taking in? If you turn the TV on and every 2 minutes, every 5 minutes, you see a pharmaceutical commercial, it's very clear they're inundating your head and your heart with their commercial for the sole purpose of brainwashing you, indoctrinating you to consume, to use their product. And because of that, you are taking in, digesting in your mind and in your heart a vision that does not necessarily come from God. In that regard, that television itself becomes a portal. Stephen?
That's why they call it programming.
And let's face it, and since you opened up the witchcraft and the dark aspect, these people are putting spells on us, so we don't even know it. And I'm going to give you, for example, on The View. How many times have you said if Jesus went to the gay parade, not only would we accept it, he'd be the grand marshal of it. And that's a spell they're putting on us. They're saying, "Oh yeah, Jesus really does get us." I saw a billboard today that actually said, "God's not mad." And I'm shaking my head. Where are you getting this?
It's the same thing that happened to Eve in the Garden of Eden when it comes to all this commercial. Thank God now we have Robert Kennedy Jr., who is the head of HHS. He already made a statement. He's going to trim all those pharmaceutical commercials on TV. Right? Glory to God. We have a man, a Christian, who's been elected, confirmed, and that's his mission from God, to save our nation from all this indoctrination, brainwashing of medicine that are not necessarily perhaps needed by our body. Believe it or not, the way God designed your body and my body, he has in our body a built-in healing system. We just didn't tap into it.
Amen.
We just didn't tap into it.
They didn't allow us to tap into it. We're only scratching the surface of tapping into it just now.
Well, the fact that we're unpacking this book of Enoch, right, to the supernatural, spiritual, divine intervention of God, that means the time is here for us
Amen.
to seek and to search the truth. We cannot afford anymore to just take in everything they're telling us without questioning it. As I said before, right, our job is not to just trust the information, to test the information. That's our job right now. We're living in that time right now, right? So back to verse 2 of chapter 7, I gave you the biblical references right there. The one important phrase, 3,000 ells, 3,000 ells. And L is about 18 inches, right? So you do a simple math, 3,000 times 18 inches, you're going to come up something like 4,500 feet. A mile is about 5,280 feet. Now you got an idea the size of this Nephilim. That's why I send you all those pictures. I think, as a matter of fact, since we're talking about it, let me show you this. This is a revelation. We're going to talk more about this when we get to that point. That's a skull of one of the so-called giants, Nephilim. You notice something right there? There's a parallel between the skull of that Nephilim giant and the skull of a Rothschild. And who are the Rothschilds?
Richest people.
Billionaires.
These are the mover and shaker, financial mover and shaker. They're Jews, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And what were they doing with all these finances that God blessed them with when it comes to the moving and the shaking?
Hoarding.
Nothing good.
Nothing good. Starting war.
Do you think it's a coincidence that look at the head of this Rothschild individual? Did you not see a similarity? The elongated skull of his head very much resemble the elongated skull of the Nephilim, the giant. What I'm trying to tell you right here, the Bible is not what it seems to be. The Jews mentioned in the Bible, we have to discern. Why do you think Jesus said to the Pharisees, "You are the children of your father, the devil"?
Huh.
Bill?
That's something though, Paul, because without denial and without even thinking about any kind of mythology, every single Egyptian prince, every single Egyptian servant, when you see them, when they're depicted, have that elongated skull.
Wow.
They all have that skull. The same thing you just showed. Even there's you can see the drawings on inside. Yeah, there you go. Every one of them have the same shape, which differs from the rest of humanity at that given time. You know,
Yeah.
and and I hate to say it, but I learned stuff like this from, who's the crazy guy with the hair who likes UFOs? I can't remember the guy's name, but that's the point that's brought up, the difference in how it's depicted.
Well,
And now we're
since you
actually looking at it, studying it.
since you bring it up, here is a picture, right, of what happened as a result of that sexual intercourse between the fallen angels and the daughters of men. They themselves, the daughters of men, ended up developing an elongated skull, as is depicted right here, clearly on the left side right there. Now you know why in all the pictures when it comes to the Egyptian, the Assyrian, more so the Egyptian, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna see the head.
Syrians too. Right.
Yes, that. And look at the bottom picture right here. What is this telling you and I? What these pictures is telling you and I simply is this. The result of this sexual intercourse between these fallen angels and the daughters of men recorded in the book of Enoch in chapter 7 and 8 that you and I are unpacking, their descendants are still around. They're all over the world to this day. Now, Noah had three sons, right? Shem, Japheth, Shem, and Ham.
Mhm.
So Ham had a son named Canaan.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible in the Old Testament identify his descendant as the Canaanites. Remember, I think it was on Sunday, 2 Sundays ago, I explained that this word Canaanite is a genitalic terminology. What it means is it does not necessarily refer to a geography where the Canaanites were staying or living. It identifies a group of tribes. Underneath this word Canaanites are the Hittites, Amorites, all kinds of ites. Their name end with this word ites. By the way, one of the tribes right there was called the Amalekites, the Amaleks, the Amalekites. The meaning of the name Amalek or Amalekite is blood liquors. Blood liquors. Now, look at verse 5 in chapter 7, how it ends. It says right here, they began to sin against birds, beasts, reptiles, fish, they devour one another's flesh. That's cannibalism, by the way, right? Eating flesh is cannibalism. And drinking blood. Is it no wonder one of the tribes categorized under this genitalic title Canaanites, Amalekites? The meaning of it is blood liquors. Nothing happens by coincidence, does it?
This is coming together.
It's kind
Where they got
Derek.
fire stuff.
So I was reading Numbers 13 today, and it was telling Moses when he was sending the spies out, and they were going to Canaan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so at the end of 13, it says there was also we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, part of the Nephilim, and they became grasshoppers. But they had also talked about, how the people of that town or that area where they sent the spy were humongous, and they were eating the people. Not so much eating.
Yes. So what you're talking about right there, I'm going to share with you right now. The first offspring from the fallen angels and the daughters of man were identified as the Nephilim. That comes from the Hebrew word nafal. Nafal means to fall. It does not necessarily refer to them falling from heaven to earth. It more focuses on them living their abode in heaven, lasting after the daughters of man, having sexual intercourse with them. For that, God punished them severely. The next generation, it's called Rephaim. Rephaim. It's because of their size. Remember, 3,000 L. So if you just take, let's just say we take 500 L's out as a result of genetic mutation, right? So the first generation resulting from Nephilim, Rephaim, they're 2,500 L. The mere sight of them are causing the people to melt like wax. This is what it means, Rephaim. To put fear, to cause you to die because of that fear. Sean?
Yeah, when I was reading about that, and then the other ones were what? Eliho or whatever. I don't even remember what the word was, but it seemed to me as if like they were getting smaller over time. Is that what that was supposed to mean?
Yes, yes. Because with every sexual intercourse that result in the procreation, the birth of another generation, the genes themselves were impacted to such a degree where their height goes down from 4,500 feet down to, I mean, if you saw the picture that I show you from that giant found in Nevada, that giant was like about what, 13 feet? Right? From 4,500 feet to 13 feet, 13 feet. Now, if you see the picture of that tree that I sent to you guys, fossilized tree.
Oh yeah, that thing was unbelievable, right?
Okay.
Like 2 miles across or something, right?
There it is.
Yeah.
Now it makes sense, doesn't it? If the height of a giant is maybe 100, 200 feet away from a mile, this tree is nothing to them. It's a lot to you and I, right? If the height of the Nephilim were close to 1 mile, and this tree, it says right here, at its height, this tree trunk was 2.5 miles across. That's 2.5 times the height of a Nephilim. It's not a big deal for them. It's a big deal to you and I. But with each and every sexual intercourse and the procreation of their children, the size of their height becomes smaller and smaller. Let me show you a picture of baby Nephilim. How's that?
Yeah, that 2.5 was actually the width. The tree was actually 10 miles high, it said.
Yes.
So where did that come from? Was that an experiment? One of the experiments from the Nephilim?
The tree, you mean?
The tree with a 2.5 mile width diameter.
Well, we could sufficiently we could say that when they began, it says right here in verse 1, right? Charms, enchantments, the cutting of roots. So they did something. They did some kind of experiments. The book of Jubilee,
everything, yeah.
Yes, the book of Jubilee gives us some example. They took 200 sheep, they took 200 goats, they mixed them. If they do that with animals, they do it with anything.
Yeah.
Why? Because they got caught in their act. They leave their abode. They had sexual course with the women because of lust, so God punished them, so they threw a temper tantrum. They just mix everything and anything. Okay? So here's a picture of baby Nephilims. Watch how elongated the skull is. 2 crania, both of children scarcely a year old, had in all aspects the same form as those of adult Nephilim. The same formation of the head presents itself in children yet unborn. And of this truth, we have had convincing proof in sight of a fetus enclosed in the womb of a mummy of a pregnant woman aged 7 months. This is coming from a doctor. So you know it's reliable.
There's some creepy looking babies.
The point being, Enoch is not telling you and I lies. When he said Nephilim, it is true. We have the evidence even today, as in the case of this picture, baby Nephilim with an elongated head. And watch what it says right here. Even while the baby is in the womb, it already is showing that evidence.
Kind of looks like Martians. So maybe they're right about that.
Yeah, it does.
I was thinking the same thing and wondering if there was some kind of connection with people seeing what they thought were some kind, because a lot of time when they talk about Martians, they have that weird long head like that.
Exactly.
Well, are you ready for more surprises?
I think if Bill took that hat off his head, it'd probably be like that.
Leave it alone, Sean. Leave it alone.
Look at the size of these books.
Yeah.
So let me share with you another picture of giant books that's found elsewhere, all over the world. So why are they hiding this from you and I?
I'd like to know what's in that Grand Canyon spot where everybody says they won't let you in.
Yes.
You know?
It's time for us to be diligent. It's time for us to do our part, right? So talking about 3000 L, there was a king in England who reigned in 1272 or something like that. His name was Edward the First. The fact that Enoch succinctly used this word L as a measurement. This Edward the First King of England, he made every town while he was a king to have at least one measuring equipment. Right here, you're looking at it right here. It's called an L1. L1. Every town under his rulership and kingship must have at least one of these measuring stick to measure. Where do you think they got this idea from? Right here. It says right here in verse 2, 3000 L's. This instrument, this measuring instrument is called an L1. An L1. So back to this chapter 7, right? It says in verse 4, the giant turns against them and devour mankind. Remember the picture of the liger that I showed last Monday? The mix of a lion and a tiger? Mm-hmm. Can you imagine how much meat that animal eats? Just think of somebody a mile high. How much meat do they consume? How much meat did this Nephilim consume? What Enoch is telling you and I in chapter 7, eventually they ran out of food and they began to eat humans. They began to eat humans. Even drink their blood. It says in verse 5. Why do you think we have this tendency of some people to drink blood? By the way, I didn't finish that other descendants of the Nephilim. So the first one out of Nephilim is Rephaim. Following Rephaim is Anakim, which is what Derek was reading to us right there. Anakims, they were known to wear necklaces, huge sizes of necklaces, and in a great bunches of necklaces. After that, the descendant after Anakim, they were called the Samumim. Samumim. I gave you all the biblical verses when it comes to where I found them. They're called Samumim because they're great warriors, otherwise known as men of renown. Men of renown. The next generation was called Emim. Emim. The next one is Giborim. This is where I was showing you the picture early on with the elongated skull. So those are the Giborims. And the last one is the Avim. Avim, A-V-I-M. So you have 7 generations, including the first Nephilim, down to the corridor of time. Their sizes shrink. Nonetheless, they're still around. This is why we find all the skeletons all over the world. Why? Because as Enoch would tell us later on, they're coming back. The surest sign that Jesus is coming back is because they are coming back themselves. The Nephilim, the giants, so to speak, right? So at the end of chapter 1, because of all the violence, because of all the crime that they committed, including eating humans alive at that, it says right here, then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. What a fall from being watchers to being lawless ones.
Yeah.
The same can happen to you and I if we're not careful. And I share with you some that drug, DMT. There are churches in Utah, in their Sunday service, they would have the congregant drink those in their worship, so-called worship, just for the sole purpose of getting in touch with the spirit realm, to receive revelation.
That's horrible.
Yeah. We have churches in our country, in the southern part, that bring snakes into their services. Think about that for a second. So, when it comes to chapter 8, right, the most important thing in chapter 8 is the opening verse right here, when it says, the breastplate, the knives, the swords, the shields, the breastplate. How many here remember this guy by the name of Tubal-Cain? Tubal-Cain.
Mm-mm.
Remember Tubal-Cain? He was the one that came up with weaponry and stuff like that. So I gave you the notes right there. First one, breastplate, Sirion. If you look at Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 9, chapter 4, verse 48, it's a wordplay. It's a wordplay because Mount Hermon, in wordplay in Deuteronomy 3, 9, 4, 48, it's that same word translated into breastplate, Sirion, Hermon, Sirion, breastplate. So that's another literary technique to help us to get the idea, to help us to focus what this fallen angel did when it comes to sharing all these secret mysteries and revelation that eventually man, having been given all these secret mysteries like Tubal-Cain, for example, ended up using them for the wrong reasons and for the wrong purposes. For example, war weaponry. To this day, you don't have to look too far. Ukraine, a war is still going on. It all goes back to this chapter where it says right there in chapter 8, for example, right, teaching some of these fallen angels, the leaders, the 20 leaders, some of them were teaching some men the metalworking,
Yeah.
sword, and weaponry.
Is there a significance in that? Because it'll like it tells us all of the leaders, and then it says the others, the rest of them taught the spells. And then when we come to, Azazel, he specifically taught the weaponry to the men. It's like he took the men aside to teach them a certain thing. He was appointed specifically to teach men. I don't know if there's a significance or it's just that's the way it went, but
Yes.
who's teaching what seems to have an importance.
Right.
The leftovers were the ones who taught the women after they mentioned the leaders. Then they specifically mentioned this one watcher, Azazel, to show the men certain things that the women didn't know. It's got to be something.
Well, yeah, there is. That's a very good question. So if you go back to chapter 6, right, for example, verse 2, let's just read from verse 1. I just mentioned that before, right? They're lusting after the daughters of men who were beautiful and comely. Guess who was the leader in chapter 6? It's not Azazel, it's Samashah, right? But the target of this group under the leadership of Samashah are the women. Coming to Azazel, the target is the men. Why is that? In Leviticus chapter 16, we talk about this a little bit. On the Day of Atonement, if you remember, they will bring 2 goats to the high priest. One of the goats will be named Azazel. The name Azazel means scapegoat. What is the big idea? Azazel is theologically linked to Cain. And who was Cain? Adam and Eve had 2 sons, Cain and Abel. So what did Cain do? He killed his brother. So Cain was a prototype. In the book of Genesis, before Enoch tells you and I about these fallen angels coming down, leaving their abode, committing this crime of having sexual intercourse under 20 leaders, one is spotlighted in chapter 6. The other one right now is spotlighted in chapter 8 by the name of Azazel. The precedence of Azazel teaching men all those bad things is Cain, who was the prototype of these fallen angels when it comes to his heinous crime of killing his own brother. So now you have both the women and the men affected. You have both the women and the men identify, both as the recipient of these divine secrets, mysteries from the fallen angels, and at the same time, they're also responsible to some degree why these fallen angels did what they did. But that's a good thinking on your part.
I guess my question was Azazel setting them up for war? Was he opening the portal for the future generations by giving them these? Was it a setup?
No,
Or was
it's
it were these the tools that say, here you go, these are tools, do what you will with them?
yeah. So the problem with these two leaders, Semashah and Asazel, some biblical scholars think that the name Asazel is kind of confusing because of Leviticus chapter 16, talking about that scapegoat, whose name happened also to be Asazel, spelled a little bit differently. One with Z as in zebra, the other one with S as in sword. Nonetheless, the whole idea here is to give you and I a complete picture. Once they fell, once they committed this sexual intercourse sin, then each leader, as it's apparent in verse 2 right here, it says right here, it describes 9 of them, what they did, what they shared to the men, to the women, and what have you. The whole idea
specific.
is, yes, it goes back to verse 1 of chapter 7 when it begins by saying all the others together.
Yeah.
And then it says each chose for himself one wife. So every one of them is eventually condemned and judged by God.
So one more question.
Sure.
In that same chapter 8, it goes into beautifying the eyelids and stuff like that. But at the start, he was talking to the men. Is this where all that came into play right there?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because if you go to First Enoch chapter 98, you see the book of Enoch is like Genesis, the book. It tells you the beginning of a lot of things that the Bible does not mention. We just talk about cannibalism in verse 5, drinking of blood, devouring one another's flesh, right?
And now I swear unto you, to the wise and to the foolish, for ye shall have manifold experiences on earth. For ye men shall put on more adornments than a woman, and colored garments more than a virgin.
So,
yep. Wow. Wow.
Is that not the genesis and the origin of transvestitism, if there is such a word?
I was just gonna say that. That's the first LGBTQ.
Exactly. That is exactly what it is, Bill.
But wait, when we look at the kings in the Bible, they're all bejeweled. And so I'm not sure whether, I guess the kings in the Bible come after this, because this is Enoch, and we just said it's Enoch, Jubilees, Genesis. But man, those kings are all always bejeweled, and they're drinking out of bejeweled cups, and they got big old crowns on. So,
and you know, Mary Alice, and you don't have to look too far in modern history to see that a lot of kings were dressed as women as well. Maybe paraded around as women as well.
The hair and the
well, here's what happens when in verse 1 of chapter 7 it says that the angels taught the women charms, enchantments, the cutting of roots, make them acquainted with plants. And as Stephen was just alluding to, right, verse 1 of chapter 8, it says right here, now under a different leader, Asazel. Asazel taught men to make swords, knives, shield, breastplate, made known to them the metals of the earth. I cited Tubal-Cain as an example. And then it says right here, the art of working the metals, bracelets, ornaments, the use of antimony, and the beautifying of eyelids. Just think about it. All this were being passed down orally, generation after generation after generation. And as more enlightenment, as more revelation came to them, just take you and I, right? We become more focused, we become more refined, whether when it comes to the sword, whether when it comes to the cup used to drink blood from, when it comes to the altar to offer the sacrifice, everything becomes more refined, everything becomes more focused. What is the big idea? The big idea simply is this: to every sin, to every evil, there is the root cause, there is the spiritual beginning, Genesis, origin, and there is no other book that tells you and I that Genesis, that origin, than the book of Enoch. Just these 2 chapters alone, it tells you and I a whole lot of Genesis and origin. Cannibalism, for one. Now we're talking about transvestitism, based on Enoch 98, verse 1 to 3.
Wow.
Now, do we have a reason not to study this book? We must all the more study this book. We must all the more study this book. Now, let me show you a couple slides, archaeological at that proves, even in that time, like the Egyptian. Watch this picture right here. These are on the wall. These pictures are telling you and I how the giants were building all these megalithic structures, whether the pyramids, whether the Sphinx. I sent some of those megalithic pictures to you in the email, right? Look at the size. Look at the size of that zebra or Sarah. Look at. Yeah, let me share with you another picture that may be even better than that one. Look at that. Bill, you mentioned something about the size of the bone, just one of the bones. Look at the lower right hand, taller than that man. So that man is about what, 7 feet? Let's assume that he's 7 feet tall. Just one of the bones of the giant. Notice right there in the top left corner, right? In that engraving on the wall of the Egyptian archaeological finding, somebody is carrying something. Look at the parallel of the size of that person carrying in that engraving when it comes to the actual building next to it. Now you know who built all those megalithic structures, whether the pyramid, whether the pagodas, all those things. There's no denying anymore. The question is, why are they still hiding this from us? Early on, before you guys came on, Derek and I were talking about a particular organization, institution called the Smithsonian Institute.
Mm.
You know
their basement. Yeah.
You know that the majority of the skeletons of the Nephilim, the Rephaim, the Anakim, the Samumim, they had it. They're keeping it for whatever reason. Derek.
So there's three movies out right now about the Smithsonian that everything comes alive at night.
What is it called?
if you Google out the Smithsonian Institute, how they came to be, you're gonna be real surprised. You're gonna be real surprised how the original intent was honorable. But the people that took over since, they were hiding all these discoveries when it comes to these archaeological finds and evidence of giants, of megalithic structure. I think I sent it out in the picture right there. There was an underwater structure. Now, early on, I cited Josephus. Josephus was referencing the Titans. How many here remember reading about Atlantis, the lost city? It's no longer a myth. It's not a myth. But for whatever reason, the government is involved in keeping those as a fact.
It's like knowledge is power. That's what they believe. And they can wield that power to come to their benefit in the future for whatever reason they may have. Well, I mean, it's almost common sense, they got one up on everybody. They're it's pathetic. It's pathetic.
The word of God in the Old Testament says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." Jesus in the New Testament says, "You individually shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." So you combine these two statements, one from the minor prophet in the Old Testament, one from the prophet from the New Testament. What is God trying to tell you and I? Wake up from your spiritual slumber. Stop being indoctrinated and brainwashed. Do your due diligent research. When we get to the earth being flat disk, you're really going to be surprised. When I show you evidence that the moon landing is fake, you're really going to be surprised. I said before, if the moon landing was that easy, how come we haven't done it since? That was what, 1960 something? So 40 years, 50 years have gone by. Let's say that it cost them $1 billion back then. You mean to tell me our government doesn't have $1 billion to come up with to send men to the moon again? And I'll show you the actual place where they took that picture and they photo up that picture.
We might not have that money though, Paul, because from what I'm looking at on the news, we're giving that to LGBTQ plays in Ethiopia.
So anyway, I don't think I missed anything. Bill, did we miss anything?
No. There's so much more. I just pray that we go slow with this. I know how much you prepare, Paul, and I know you have a lot of notes, but I love this has to get taken slow to get taken in. This is the cornerstone of moving forward.
Yeah.
And I appreciate everything tonight. Tonight was eye-opening in so many different angles.
So if you notice the way I'm doing this, right? If I have to share some of those pictures so you get a feel before you come on Monday night, it will cut the time, number one. It also is with the editing, right? Now, it also is good to be prepared, so to speak, with all those biblical references. Like Sean has been, very diligent in doing his own research right there. And like I always say, like Roger said last night, he put it very well. I don't have to always agree with you, but what you present to me is a challenge. And it caused me to get up off my butt and do my research. That's exactly what he said.
Proverbs 25:2.
25:2. It is the glory of God to hide the matter, but it is that same glory afforded to the kings who would search the matter out. Nonetheless, thank God that we are able to process this tonight, and then later on I'll edit it and I upload it on YouTube. And like I always say, just don't watch it one time. Keep watching. Just because we've gone through 8 chapters now, go back reading it again. And the Holy Spirit will reveal to you all the more.
Amen.
Faith is intended by God to be fluid. What that means is, it says, precept by precept, I will give it to you, says God. Because if He was to give us all, we cannot handle it.
So during some of my looking around and reading and stuff like that, I came across this thing that said that, you know how a lot of the angels have names like Michael, Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel, Tamiel, etc. They all end in L. And during some of my research, I found something that said that Lucifer did not have an L on the end of his name because he was never really from God. Where like the L meant kind of like that they're from God type of thing on the end of their name. What do you think about that? Does that sound?
Because he was not a typical angel. Ezekiel and Isaiah told us very succinctly he was a cherub. He belonged to the category of cherubim. That's why he doesn't have L behind his name. When we get to Ezekiel chapter 28, it's going to become clear. He was a cherub, it says by Ezekiel. Isaiah says the same thing. So he was in charge of all the worshiping angels in heaven because he was a cherub. Ezekiel chapter 1 tells you and I that 3 groups of angels of a higher rank and order revealed in Ezekiel chapter 1. The Ophanim that appeared to Ezekiel as wheel within wheels, right? Isaiah tells us of another group, seraphim, fiery one, burning ones, and then Ezekiel chapter 1 also mentioned the cherubim. So these are the 3 rank and file higher than the angel. And Paul tells us the counterpart of it when it comes to the demonic spiritual realm, principality, power, authority, rulers, workers of darkness in all the heavenly places. Now what is interesting about Ephesians was in the original language, the word used right there, governor, was taken out and replaced with another word. Why is that important? What Paul is trying to tell you and I in that original word governor, human rulers, just like these chapters are telling you and I, they can be consumed, occupied, possessed by demonic spirit to the point where they become the associate. What I mean by associate is partners in crime. when it comes to the sin of the angels. Just think of this chapter 7 and 8 right here. Imagine if God had not put these angels, bound them, and kept them in Tartarus.
Wow.
Imagine that.
We'd be in trouble.
We'd be in a whole lot
of trouble.
You think it's bad now, Stephen?
So let me ask you then: are the Nephilim the caged angels? Are there some of the Nephilim caged angels, or are they the ones that are in bondage? No,
Well,
I guess I'm thinking that because the Nephilim were the offspring of the fallen angels, the fallen.
so the Nephilim is the first hybrid, the first
Yeah.
group of hybrid. Then the succeeding ones are the following hybrids, so to speak.
I'm just curious, then where do you think the Nephilim are going to come back from? And just
The
because
book of
there's a line of them now?
No, well, part of it is because when they die because of the flood, right? We talk about this, right? Their human body died, but their spirit becomes
Carried
demon.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the book of Revelation also tells us in Revelation chapter 16, I believe, right? It says right there, Jesus revealing to John, the day will come when God will allow all those spirits that's being bound by him to be released one last time.
Wow. Revelation really ties in with Enoch.
Yes.
To a very close extent we should study. Wow.
And watch this in the next coming days, months, and years. You're going to hear more and more of sightings of UFOs, aliens. Keep an eye on that. You're going to see more and more. So we are being sandwiched right here in two ways. The coming back of the Nephilim, if you want to put it that way, right? Like this chapter 7 and 8. The aliens with their flying saucers, UFO, and at the same time, humanity itself is coming up with transhumanism. Cyborg, that we talked about last Monday, mixing genetics of man with animals. Exactly what is happening right here. So we're being hit two ways right here, from above and from below. You think God is going to sit on his throne and do nothing? No,
Right.
he's going to come and rescue us.
Amen. Amen.
He has to come back.
Focus.
He has to come back, just like he did here with the flood, right? Thank you, Father, indeed, Lord. I mean, I don't know what else to say, Father, really. There is so much in this book. This is a Genesis within a Genesis, in the sense that it tells us the origin of so many truths, so many facts and realities of life, that for so long, one way or another, one reason or another, we don't bother spending time. But by your sovereignty, we are. So help us not to take this lightly. Help us to apply it. However, Holy Spirit, you're leading us in our own individual personal life. One thing is for sure. There is no need for us to be spending time studying your word, divinely inspired at that, if we don't intend to apply it in our lives. So grace us to do just that, for the glory, honor, and praise of your holy name. And I ask this in the name of the Son of Man that made this possible through your Holy Spirit. Amen.
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 Wow.
All right.
Thank you, Paul.